The purpose of this presentation is to give you a good understanding, or a first understanding, of how observatories are seen currently from our perspective in the work of sustainability, and facilitate then later on more discussion. There are many implications which still lack the evidence, because it is basically a lead we observe. And many of you here in the room know how much they are leading the discussion in their destinations or in their countries. Miriam over here, I can refer to as one of the persons having led the discussion in my office on the rules and the frameworks of the observatories many years ago, when we started here at UNWTO to advance the framework for the observatories and to produce a framework which will last. What we were all asked back then was, under the impression of other existing indicators, especially ETHIS and the undertaking of GSDC on issue areas, can WTO suggest a new standard of indicators for destinations so that we can follow? And our conclusion, by talking to many of you, and especially I gave you a rundown of the history before, was we need to understand how we support destinations in their efforts of sustainability. And the very first thing we learned from there is how important it is for us to support a process. And when you look at one of the documents all observatories have signed up to, the framework of observatories, you will find in there that we made you commit to a process. A process where monitoring is serving a purpose. And this purpose is clearly defined of the benefit for the local population and sustainable development. And we outlined in the rules over there that this is must based on a first analysis of the situation in your destination, which we call the preliminary report, which we review, give you feedback, and we share with you our opinion about how much you have identified pressing issues well, and where we ask you then in this report to tell us over a timeline of maximum of 2 years how you intend to implement the missing criteria for this process, 2 years, to become a fully fledged observatory. An observatory which at the beginning of the process is discussing the strategy's implementation through clear targets and objectives, discusses them with stakeholders in a participatory approach, which not necessarily has to be first in public and then behind closed doors, but actually the other way around, when we discuss with the stakeholders first behind closed doors, what are the objectives? Then we commit to contribute to the evidence, the analysis, and then to a process of discussion why we have achieved certain targets or not, also in a participatory manner. Then publishing it, that's another criteria of the framework, making it publicly available. Have we reached these targets? Have we made progress on what we promised to do? And from over there, close the circle. It's a very classical circle in controlling. It's a very classical circle for us in participatory approaches of sustainable development. These are the guiding principles for INSTO observatories. They are not economic, they are not environmental, they are not social. They are all together, and above all, they are transparent and participatory. That is fundamental for us. This is something which is difficult, but we wanted you to understand how healthy this is for destinations. We have learned that from the best among you in different facets. Nobody is perfect, but many of you have different elements over there taking to perfection. And what I want to show you right now to 2-3 slides is what I said in my opening remarks. Where do you stand as destinations? And why do we come to this conclusion that destinations are leading efforts? Because we here at WTO made it our hobby to analyze national tourism policies. National policies or similar documents which are reflecting the political will of a government to guide the tourism sector, not for a year, not for 2 years, but for a longer period. And on average, it is a document which is formulated for 10 years. So in here, we are outlining our will of transforming tourism of a long-term perspective, which should, in most countries, be across the different times of a government, and which make clear where we see our priorities and where we put our resources. The interesting thing is when we did this for the very first time, and there are several colleagues here, especially Virginia in the room, who have been very actively engaged back then in this work. We came to the analysis here, having analyzed that for the perspective of sustainability and sustainable production, sustainable consumption and production, that all national policies, without exception, spoke about sustainability being important. I repeat, all, 100%. So actually, we could have closed the book and said, job done. The problem was that we, when going deeper, looked then into what are the instruments they are actually referring to in their national tourism policies to make this objective a reality. And what we saw over there was actually a huge discrepancy. And while we have this consensus of sustainability being a national tourism priority, at the same time, we see that 95% of what we found in there was still referring to economic monitoring tools. And in something more than the 56% of the cases we found over there, then environmental monitoring is also taking place, or at least is encouraged to take place. To see then to what extent that was conducted, we reviewed the national tourism administrations, usually the phase where promotion or where other achievements are communicated. Yeah, this is in case of Spain, Tour de España, or in case of Germany, DCT. We looked over there into what reports have been actually published about the success of their work. We found that the majority of these reports, 38, have been still focusing on in the economic dimension, being public, and only 11% of those reports being published focused on the environmental dimension. So you definitely can see what many of the people as a guts feeling make a statement about, saying that there is a need to walk the talk in tourism and that there's a huge implementation gap. So then we are coming to the perspective of observatories, and you through your daily work might make this observation regularly, that you feel that you are leading, that you are spearheading in your destination the implementation of sustainable policies. And I see here hectical work across the PowerPoints. That was not the intention. That was a slow, not passionate slideshow here. Okay. The implementation you are leading, actually, we can echo, is leading also in many countries the catalytic interventions my colleague Virginia was mentioning before. So it is for us not rare, but rather the standard that we hear from destinations being interested to implement certain specific catalytic interventions or engaging us on the measurement related to them. And why is that? Because here in destinations, it is assumed, we don't have the total evidence, but there's evidence out there. Policies are closer to the voter. And we see here more closely whether that what we promised is actually getting implemented. That is one of the reasons or the explanations why destinations are so often right now seen in these discussions and sharing with us their experiences. This is why we are open to destinations. That is why we are committed to work with you and to advance over here the thinking for the benefit of other destinations, but also of national actors. This was the previous. So widening the perspective is what I wanted to give you. And that was right now widening the perspective, why we are focusing on you as destinations. I wanted to, especially those who are here for the first time or hear from us from the first time, to give the framework why UNWTO is interacting and prioritizing this work, but at the same time showing you how we are widening across the political sphere the agenda on measurement and evidence-based decision. And here you see how the vision, which Virginia presented before, was taken even further to a higher level of the G20 last year under the presidency of Italy. And the vision was recognized as a theoretical element, how desired development of the tourism sector globally in these G20 nations. And the elements over there, especially linked with the desired transformation, spoke about elements completely new, public health, until then absolutely not mentioned, but the One Health approach nowadays becomes very clear, very present, and the link between pandemics and biodiversity is, to many of those of you here committed to sustainability, very clear, but it is still discussed to lose or to dislink. The social inclusion, circular economy, biodiversity, and climate action, all these fields are in there. And also in the G20 document, we made reference to INSTO, observatories. And we featured over there two of the observatories having committed already and worked during the pandemic on the indicators related to public health. So that is for us a political way of giving to your work, to your commitment, legitimacy and political recognition, so that, and that is another important element for us, that destinations, observatory, which are supporting sustainable development, are recognized in national tourism policies as a useful element of implementation of objectives. Whether this is a competence of the state, the federal government, or the local authorities, but that this logic is recognized and supported, that destinations can, through evidence generation and participatory approaches, make a lot of difference to the implementation, and wherever possible shall be in frameworks being recognized and shall be financially and politically supervised and supported. That brings me right now to the 11 mandatory issue areas. I gave before, when I welcomed also the ambassador, a short introduction to the history of the indicators. In the year 2004, UNWTO published the indicators of sustainable tourism development that were back then a suggested list of indicators, suggested because that was before the time of big data, and that means we wanted to bring to those committed the possibility of finding the information where it is actually generated, and some 500 possible sources for indicators, or others call it indicators only, were suggested in here for more than 40 issue areas. And the concept of issue areas in indicators for most of you is very clear. We have an issue area, and in this issue area, we have possible indicators. And that is where we made then the mandatory element for an observatory, suggesting at the beginning that you should monitor in other issue areas as well, but making 9 mandatory issue areas part of the framework, which was passed through the Executive Council, and then later on informing the other governing bodies of the organization. So 9 were originally mandatory issue areas, which you find in the guiding framework document. And here, several years ago, we started to bring to your attention that it is desired from our perspective to include climate action and accessibility as additional issue areas for your perspective. And right now we are making it compulsory for observatories to also report on that, making it a total of 11 mandatory issue areas, where we widen the perspective also through the way of monitoring and reporting. Now, Cordula will speak about the next steps. Cordula, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, dear Dirk. Dear all, also from my side, a very warm welcome to UNWTO headquarters. It's great having you in the room after such a long period of time. With most of you, I have worked especially on your application documents. It was a pleasure doing so, and I hope it was not too hard for you to deal with me during these processes. Just following up on what Dirk has said, the widening the perspective has to do also with knowledge creation on our side, but that also helps you on your side to increase our knowledge on measurement issues and on the use of indicators on destination levels. Here we have, and this leads to a repository of tools and resources that we have compiled for you, the publications of UNWTO. So this use of indicators measuring sustainability is something that had started in the 90s by UNWTO, work that has led to several important publications. The four that I mentioned here or showcase here are the ones that are can still be used, especially the one in green, where more than 500 indicators are mentioned. The key issue areas are stemming from there. There is where the ideas for the indicators are coming from. So we believe that every other indicator that has come out after this publication from 2004 is based on this publication. If this is now the ETIS, the European Tourism Intelligence System, or the GSTC, this the basis was always this Indicators of Sustainable Development for Tourism Destinations guidebook. Having said this, we have revised this books, have then compiled for all the 11 key issue areas relevant extracts of the books. We have also included other publications that are out there. This is work in progress. So whenever you have a research paper or a publication that you wish to be uploaded on this repository of tools and resources, then please go ahead and send it to us. In general, because I spoke about knowledge creation for you, for us, for national governments, are your annual progress reports. This is where we see which indicators you are using. We see which local working groups you are having in place. We see which alliances you have for carrying out the measurement in the key issue areas. This work is important for us because it helps us to better understand where you stand with the measurement issue areas, but also on the use of the indicators. Another very, very important source of information for us are your application documents, in particular the preliminary reports. Most of you, and I think the 7 news observatories that are going to speak in the next session, have gone through this process recently. The preliminary reports are very comprehensive. We understand it's a long process. It's this process that you have to go through with your local stakeholders. You agree on the indicators, you agree on the key issue areas, on the mandatory ones of INSTO, but also other ones that are a priority for your destination. And by doing this, we see also the commitment that the destination has for becoming a sustainable tourism destination in the end. Having said this, it allows us, as I said before, to see which indicators you are using. This is something very important. Here's a small extract on energy management, who is using what, but also to see if you have created new ones, because there are also some new ones around that are modern, that are based on the current situation in the destinations. So that is for us also a very good indication on the use of indicators per issue areas. And we are not only looking into the UNWTO baseline indicators, but also others, the ETIS, GSTC, and others that are out there from OECD also. We're looking into this. Having said this, I give the floor back to Dirk.
Cordula, thank you very much. And I hope everybody understood that this intervention of ours was read now, especially trying to talk to all of you as DT. We are reading your annual reports. We are really reading them, yeah? Cordula and myself, and Cordula more than myself, but most of them I'm reading as well. And we enjoy that. And sometimes we tell you, look, this is your word, right? We know where they come from. So it is actually strange for an international UN organization, especially to read those reports in detail. But for us, it is the source of engaging with you and understanding what is moving you and how you are struggling somewhere. We're engaging with you, especially then in the areas where we think that you have made progress. And that is happening through the annual reports, but also through the preliminary reports we see. And here another word, we are sometimes so surprised as UNWTO to see candidatures of observatories which have worked on their candidature completely on their own, and then all of a sudden they pop up like champiñones, also as champions, but champiñones, yeah, so mushrooms, yeah. So there's a wet environment which is facilitating right now with the right nutrition out there, the establishment of observatories, and we are welcoming that very much.